But when we talk about these soul families, which are usually a key person in our life, yes, they see them, but people, I think, often feel or want them to be the people that they're close to. But it's very often that they discover that they're the person that's created the most havoc for them. And it might be that that person shows up in their soul group and they're like, what's he doing here? What's she doing here?
My guest today is Dr. Toni Reilly, and she is Australia's foremost international past life and reincarnation specialist. She's the best-selling author of Awake, The Purpose to Life and Why You Are Here. She has extensively researched reincarnation, past lives, the afterlife, and beyond through her own experiences and interacting with thousands of her clients and students. And I am so excited to dive into this conversation. Welcome, Dr. Toni.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm very excited to be here to have this conversation.
Likewise. So I would love to start by learning a little bit about your journey. How did you get into researching reincarnation and doing past life regression?
Yes. So when in my middle 30s, about 20 years ago, not 30, I went through a marriage breakup. So it was a bit of a changing point in my life. And it was a big changing point because prior to that, I was very mainstream and really not aware of the spiritual side of life, at least not to the extent that it went down. So around that time, I became obsessed with my intuition and working on my intuition and developing my intuition. So the long story short is I was told that I need to learn to be quiet, meditate. So I found myself a meditation teacher who was normal, because back then I thought monks meditated. I didn't realize that people meditated. Everyday people did. So I found this lovely lady called Mary Milady, and she let me start to participate in her development groups. And after a few months, I would say, of developing intuition, she said, read this book. And it was Many Lives, Many Masters, which is the Dr. Brian Weiss phenomenally successful book. And I think often a lot of people's window into past lives, certainly it was for me. Anyway, she told me to read that book. It took me ages to find it, but I did. And I read it almost in one turn. And I remember reading it and thinking, whoa, this is what I'm here to do. I've never been so excited or had that knowing before, actually. And that was it. It set me on a bit of an obsessive mission to explore past lives.
I've actually never read that book, but it keeps popping up for me.
I think it's one of those books that people read at the time that it's important to them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's a beautiful book. He writes so beautifully. So it's a nice thing to read.
Okay. So then did you get into doing past life regressions, or did you start out by having a past life regression, or how did that happen?
Yeah. So after reading the book, I thought, I'm going to have to go to America because I'm in Australia. I have to go to America and have this past life regression done with Dr. Brian Weiss. Of course, he didn't already at that stage, he didn't do them anymore. But I didn't know that right then. So I've just read the book. I'm like, I want to get this done. But I went back to Mary and I said, I must have this done. And she said, I can do it. So within a few days, I was on her couch having my very first past life regression, and it was extraordinary. And I say extraordinary because I'm quite a logical person, but I know that what I saw in there was not imagination and it wasn't made up. And it was truly magical. And I think the other thing that is so reassuring about it is I got so emotional. What I know now, so many years later, is it's an affirmation for me. Like these tears just run. I don't have to be even sad. They just start coming out. And it's like truth. It's a truth serum or something, the way that my body reacts. So I had that. But I also could sense the emotion in there, and I knew details aside from what I could see with what I was recalling. So that was extraordinary. Plus, I discovered at that stage that people do this past life regression for therapy. And I thought, I came up with a few things to address in myself, which of course I hadn't even realized were issues. But so I had asked for 3 things in that session. And one was, why am I in my mid-30s and I don't know about intuition? How is this possible? So I asked about that. And I asked about public speaking. I could not do it. It used to make me want to, I feel like I'm being dramatic, but I feel like I wanted to just die if I would have to speak up in front of even 2 people, for example. It was a terrible feeling. So I asked about that. And the third thing I asked for was, I went through school covering my handwriting, and I couldn't bear it if the teacher was around kind of my back. And I didn't realize that that was weird because it was just my reality. And anyway, those are the 3 things I asked for, and my regression fixed them all. So I came out with those types of symptoms. Actually, you need to get on with life and see, has it worked? Because I didn't come out of my session and do any speaking in public or writing. But over the coming weeks and months, I most certainly did, because everything in that arena escalated for me, and it was easy. So yes, of course, from there, I said to Mary again, I have to learn this. And she said, I'm having a class this weekend and teaching it in my lounge room. And so I got to attend this class with from memory, it was 3 other girls, so just 4 of us. And the way that she taught us was she kept regressing. She would regress one of us on the couch, and the 3 of us would look and listen. And she did it for 2 days, over and over and over again. So we got regressed quite a few times, and we listened to what was happening with each of the girls in the class. So it was amazing. So that's how we learned. And from there, I started to see clients. I felt so, I'm going to say natural. I felt just at ease with it. I didn't feel any lack of confidence. So at that stage, I had just started doing intuitive readings in a crystal shop or a new agey type shop. And so I happened to be around, I guess, people who were already potentially interested in past lives, and it wasn't too out there. So, and because of that, so many people wanted to have regression. So that was when I was told, actually, I had a lot of guidance, and I was told that I must document every case. So from that moment, my very first case, I kept notes on every single case. That was how it all started.
Thank you for sharing. I have so many questions. I don't even know what to ask first, but maybe we could go to that first regression that you had. I was watching on your YouTube where you shared briefly about those past lives and why you had those 3 issues with being so afraid of public speaking and not wanting people to read your writing. Would you be open to sharing what those lives were and how it correlated to this life?
Absolutely. For some reason, I was got a little emotional thing then. But with those lifetimes that I saw that fixed them, the first one was I was a young girl in Scotland, and I was about 17, and I could see how I was dressed. It was the late 1700s, and I had a little brother, and there's only a few details that I recall that I could see, but I saw we lived in this kind of cottagey looking home, and I could see that I had a little brother. He was 8 and I was 17, and I didn't see her, but I knew that my mother had died giving birth to him. What I saw was that people would come to the house. They would put out their hands, and I would put out my hands either over or under them. And I must have been able to heal them in some way, make them feel better, say words that were affirming to them. But obviously they would come along and they would leave feeling better. So I was known for this, and they would come to our cottage for this. And also I was able to mix up poultice, so collect leaves and herbs and like fungus, these types of things from the forest that we lived near, and make poultice, look like green, mushy, gross stuff. And mainly it was to put on open wounds. But anyway, these were the things that I saw. But the main thing when I very first saw that life was I was to be hung. And often when you regress, you see the scene of trauma. Almost sometimes you see it first. And then what we do in therapy is we go back because we want to find out, how did this happen, or why did it come about? So this is how I discovered about my brother, that I had my brother, and my brother had told probably his friends what I did. And maybe it was even common knowledge, because certainly people would come to our cottage. But I think at that time in history, it was not cool to be a witch, or the witch hunts were happening. And of course you were not a witch. You were some sort of lovely healer who knew what leaves to use. And potentially, this wasn't my thing, but often they were midwives. But so my brother had said something, and they came for me to hang me. And it's so interesting. I could see myself in the middle of, it is a little village, in the middle of the village on a platform, almost so typical to what you potentially see in films. But they're on this platform, and the people are there hating you. They're petrified of you, hating you, yelling, wanting you dead. And the one other detail I remember was somebody let me off that platform. And I didn't see him actually in that regression, but I knew that someone did. And I had this second where I could run. So I'd run, and I ran out of town, along the road out of town, and I took shelter under some like rocky formations, not deep enough to be cave, but rocky formations. And I stayed there. I did die not that long later, actually. But that was what I saw the first time that I saw that life. And it's I believe it's what really made my intuition better. And also it made me confident to continue down this path of healing, I guess, with the regression, with the readings, the kind of work that I had just started to get into. So that was that. I did end up finding out so much more information about that life, because actually I ended up encountering or meeting the man that let me go. He's so special. Something that happened a long time later in my work was I think it has to happen to me first so that I can really grasp that the reality of it. And that happens to so many people. They tell you it. But I did meet that man in this life, and it's really cool that you recognize each other. But it's like the recognition isn't, at least it wasn't for me, exactly instant, but you know something, it's like, well, there's something about that person. And then on reflection, it's as though it's fed to you and you get to go, well, it's to do with this. And of course, I was reminded of that lifetime. So that was super exciting. But I'd love to tell that story, but I'll wait. But the other thing that fixed my public speaking thing was I saw myself in the same regression, had three things. Mm-hmm. I saw myself as this man, and I was about 40, and I was pretty well fed. I could see that. And I had my black leather shoes on and white stockings and knickerbocker pants and a jacket. And I had this feeling that I was somebody important. And I felt like I was the mayor or something of that in that time. And it was a little town that I lived in. And I could see that I used to write with a quill in the most beautiful book. But I would write. And I saw that there came a time where what I was writing, I had felt that I had this knowing that there was going to be something coming to destroy our town, or it was going to affect our people. And it was only a storm, nothing even outrageous or weird. It wasn't war, it was a storm. And I thought, I have to tell the people so that we can prepare. And so I gathered them around, and I saw that they came around because I was the mayor or something of that kind of status. They came and I told them, well, a storm's coming. We need to prepare. And they were, well, how would you know this? This is ridiculous. How would you know? They completely turned on me. And I think in that turn, they found my book that I apparently wrote prophetic knowledge in, stuff that would come to me, maybe even my dreams. But anyway, I was journaling everything, and they found that book, thought I was completely nuts, and they locked me up. So I died from that. I think I was locked up for quite some time, but I did die from it. And so this particular lifetime answered why I didn't want to speak in front of people and why I wanted to cover my writing. Couldn't let them see. So that's how it played out for me in this life. And those were the things that I saw in my first past life to address them.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I've heard so many people, regressionists that I've spoken with have told me that simply becoming aware of the issue that developed in the previous life will clear up whatever symptoms you're having in the present life.
Yes. It's so simple, the most beautiful therapy. And I think people maybe become alarmed at the potential for what you see, but there's something about it when you're in there that's, maybe I could call it detached. You know it's happening, you can see it's happening, you can even feel the emotions, but there's a detachment there. So it's nothing to be afraid of. It's really an uplifting and extraordinary experience.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I have a question. When you're having a regression done, is the person experiencing that life again? They can, and the reason why I ask is because I was under the impression from reading, I think it was Dolores Cannon, that she said her clients were so deep into trance that they didn't remember anything when they came back. So I've always been curious about that.
Yes, Dolores Cannon does her QHHT, or in the process of getting to that. So from my understanding, yes, a lot of her people were in very deep and they didn't necessarily remember. But with the recall, when I do it, or the regression, you don't need to be that deeply relaxed. So what I found with the way that it was done for me and the way that I continue to do it is you are still conscious, you're relaxed. So you're very aware of what's going on in here and not so much aware of what's going on around you. But in here, it's all happening. So you're focused on it, but you certainly can remember it and you can feel it. Everything is there for you. Though sometimes some people, it depends on each individual actually. Some people get so much information and they're so detailed that for the time that they're in there, which feels timeless to them, they say so much. So that would be the reason that they don't remember it all. And then if you remind them at the end of the session, this, and this, they're like, oh, that's right, that happened. So yeah, so you definitely do not need to be that deeply in trance or that deeply relaxed.
So I have a few questions to ask because I was watching your YouTube channel and there's some really fascinating information there. I have a whole list of questions just from that. One thing that really struck me is that you said in one of your videos, if you have a recurring dream, that can be a sign of something that happened in a previous life. And when I heard that, I never heard somebody say that before, but I was reminded that I had a recurring dream as a child that almost every single night it was the same dream over and over and over, and it was a nightmare. It's this feeling of intense pressure and suffocation. And so that really got my attention when you said that. Could you share your thoughts on that and maybe some examples of what people have experienced?
Yeah. So the dreams are often something that pushes people to come for regression, or they have a spontaneous recall. Either they get given more in the dream or they have a spontaneous recall for more detail. But with the dreams, if it's recurring, it's a little bit different to a metaphorical dream. A past life one will have elements of, shall I say, reality and real lifeness to them, and you don't forget them either. They're so real, they're happening, you don't forget them. And usually the same thing happens each time you dream it. So there's one dream that's coming to me. I do think it's one that I talk about on YouTube, but there's many. But this one in particular, this is a spontaneous resolution to it, where this little girl would be afraid that their house was going to burn down. And she'd tell her mother that the house was going to burn, check the stove, check the heater, check everything. Apparently this little girl would run this past her mother every night. And at some point later in her life, but she was still in her teens, she had the dream where she was shown the whole life, and she saw that the house did burn down. She got the address and everything, and she saw that the parents, her family was died in this fire. So, and what happened from that for that girl was it completely stops. You know what happened. You've got the answer. You know what the dream was happening for and what the fear was from, and it cures it. And it's the same as when someone comes along with a dream for past life regression, is that we facilitate that they recall what happened. And as we said earlier, it fixes it. And it's really extraordinary, actually. So the dreams that people have, they might be just a snippet, and it might be that someone has a sense that they're going to walk across a bridge and they cannot do it, or they do and suddenly they're out of the dream. So they don't get all the information, but they know that there's something torturing them, if you like, or traumatizing them. And if I could just say, to have it cleared is so liberating. Even if you think something terrible is going to be what you see in the regression, it will be worth it, and it will feel so much better afterwards. So your dream, Melissa, would certainly, was it fixed spontaneously, or do you still need a regression?
I would not say that it's been fixed. When I had the dream, there's this intense feeling of fear and pressure, like I'm just gonna completely fall apart, like just lose myself, And I've dealt with that fear my entire life, and I still deal with it. I've done a lot of trauma work and gotten therapy and all these things, but I wouldn't say that it's cleared.
We could definitely do something with that. I do know that you had pre-birth memories, which
Yes.
is extraordinary. So you've had, it's interesting, and it gives me the chance actually to explain the two differences with past life regression and those amazing spaces that we go to with the between life phase, or where we're preparing for incarnation. All of these are places that we can go to with recall therapy. And what happens is the person goes where the answer is for them. So if it's in the in-between phase, pre-birth, or even beyond that, they go there. And it's a very beautiful experience. Whereas if the core is from a past life memory, then they will go there and we'll explore what happened. And of course, one of the main things we want to do is understand why it happened. There's never any reason, no reason to ever have any regret for anything that's been done or happened in a past life. We're not exploring them to dwell in the past. We're exploring them to make our now better, to make us free of fear and free of recurring dreams, and just to understand ourselves on a deeper level so that we are more peaceful in our lives.
So, as somebody who's regressed thousands of clients, I would love to ask you, what is the purpose of life? Why do we have these physical incarnations?
So, over these years and years of research, the purpose of life is so simple. It's to experience the senses that a body allows us. So the overriding thing that we do not have when we're not in a body is emotion. So we also don't have our mind. So our thoughts, which is our willpower, our ego even, those are the purpose of life, to experience emotion, thoughts, sensations like touch, taste, sound, all of those things that make life magical, but also they have the opposing effect as well. So it depends what experience we're having in our lives. And I think the other discovery that's so important for people to understand is grief, which is obviously traumatic. And it's something that at some stage in all of our lives we will experience. For some people it's young, for some people it's could be closer to even when they're leaving here, when they're old, but at some stage we will experience it. And what happens when we come out the other side of grief is we're wiser. So one way or another, we don't have to have a spiritual lifetime, but one way or another, the purpose of life is to have these experiences of intense emotion, and also experiencing what it's like to be out the other side of it and feeling different, wiser, and having a more philosophical understanding of life, and also less fear, if not it's eliminated, of death. There's much more ease. So that's my discoveries on the purpose of life. And I know that we've been sold, I think, that our purpose is this grand success story. And of course, for some, there will be legacies that are left, and stories of, or experiences and circumstances where there is fame and celebrity and all sorts of purposes that are met. But it's not the actual purpose of reincarnating as a human. Yes, we'll have certain experiences that we'll encounter in each incarnation, and they're the purpose of our life. Much more emotive oriented than doing oriented.
That's beautiful. And it makes sense to me because the great sages and saints that have sort of paved the spiritual path for us have all talked about coming to the present moment and being present with what you're doing now. And that sort of sounds like the same thing that you're talking about, being here for the experience. So, is there any truth to the idea that we are growing and evolving spiritually, and that is there going to be an end to our reincarnation cycle, or are we just purely here for the experience?
From my discoveries, I feel certain that our humanity is a planned experiment. And so everything that happens and everything that evolves us, we can see it decade by decade, actually, when you break it down, how and why everything was meant to happen. And we're in a very exciting time now with massive changes happening to humanity. So yes, there will be an end date. I don't know it, but I do think the experiment will complete at some point. And maybe that looks like something like the Ice Age, which happened in the past. But yes, I'm sure there will be something. I think something that I don't feel is always portrayed to my findings is that we are evolving as a soul. But then I've realized that some people see the soul as the all being God energy or universal energy, and some see it as spirit energy. But the way that I see it is the spirit is who we are each time we incarnate. So for the minute, I'm the spirit of Toni. And when I die, if someone's contacting me through mediumship, they'll be contacting the spirit of Toni. But my soul has been all of the people that I've been. And it's this culmination of all the energy. And then, of course, when we're beyond even the reincarnation phase, where we're portions of the soul are coming, then we're back to this, everything is all one. So, so it's interesting. But my findings are that when we return home, Earth is not for enlightenment. We're already that. We are returning to it. We come here with that. We forget it. But when we die, we return immediately back to that. So life is truly for the physical and emotional experiences. Those are my discoveries. It's hard for some people to fathom, but it's a beautiful thing to know that we have this phenomenal space to go back to. And I think that people who have had the experience of near death, or they've had a facilitated experience where they go home, I call it home, or even the past lives and where we go after they die, the feeling there, it's not describable. And I'm sure you've felt it with your own experiences. It's really not the same feeling as anything that we have here. It's almost beyond something that you could describe. It's so amazing. Amazing doesn't even do it justice.
Yes, it's so hard to talk about it because anything that I say, I feel like it's so cheesy. Like, you have to say it, imagine love times a million. And I've even said this before. It's not even that there isn't words to describe it. We don't have the feelings here. So you can't. It would be like trying to describe another color that nobody's ever seen.
That's right. Oh, that's so beautiful how you said that. I love that. Yeah.
Thank you. One more question on this topic and we'll move on. Probably the most common question that I get in my comment section is, why would we choose to come to Earth and suffer? And I'm wondering if you have a perspective on that, given that life is about the experience. Why would some people, anyway, come here to have an experience of such suffering, like somebody who's starving or has a child that's murdered or is in a war or something like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I agree that it's probably one of the things that people really can't can't get their head around it. But the what I know is every life and every circumstance is destined. It's planned before we're born, and I think what happens is we have the experience, and the reality is, unless we had that experience, no matter how tragic it sounds to us, having not had an experience such as the ones that you've just mentioned, we perceive it to be, we perceive it through our lens and can't fathom how terrible it would be. But often the person who's come to experience it sees it through a very different lens. They have a different perspective of what's happened. I don't say that they don't understand that they were abused, but they have a different perspective on it than what we might perceive, having not had that same experience. But what happens is, through a terrible experience, obviously we start as children, but through those terrible experiences, we gain the ability to have strength, to have compassion, to learn these things, to have courage, to, at some stage, we're experiencing all of these gamut of human characteristics and emotions. So always, whatever's happening, if it's not for us, for example, if I think of one that I think is really traumatic for people, probably mothers or parents, to perceive, is the loss of a child or a baby. But what happens is, the baby's soul knows that it's coming for a tiny short time, and then it's going. And the purpose of that is, while we think it's, oh, that baby never got to live life, it went so early, it went before its time, it's tragic. But actually what happened is, it set up this god-awful emotional experience for the mum, first the mum, and then whomever else is affected by that loss. And something like that will carry through the siblings. If there's siblings, it might be that mum can't function properly for a time, or maybe throughout their childhood. So there's so many people affected by that loss, for example. And this is what happens with the things or the circumstances that we experience. There's a ripple effect that is meant to happen for each individual to experience emotion and to grow as that person, with courage and with empathy and with compassion and all of the things that life dishes us up.
Thank you for explaining that. I know it's a really heavy topic.
Yeah.
So one thing that you mentioned in your email is that you've studied facilitated near-death experiences, and I would love to learn more about what those are.
Yes, I like to talk about that, to explain, because so many people have near-death experiences, and the way that I see that is a spontaneous visit home, if you like, because they have this extraordinary experience. What I notice with the near-death experiences is they are the same in the regard of, it's for that individual. So they do differ slightly. Some things are the same, or the same sort of string, and then some of the experiences they have is very individual to them. And that's what happens when we facilitate in between lives, or the person goes beyond that. They get in that space what they need at the time. And it might be that they need to understand why they had such a terrible, abusive time as a child, or such a broken heart from the breakdown of a relationship, whatever it might be. When they go into that space, where I describe it as a facilitated NDE, they get to speak with, some people will call it presence, some people see human form, some people just see light, some people only get the nothingness, which is, of course, the most beautiful nothingness that's indescribable, but they will get whatever they need in that space. And I think for some people, it can be very important for them to recognize people that they're here with now. A lot of people are curious in that regard because they have, for some people who have a beautiful relationship and they're like, oh, I want to see when we've been together before. So they might want to know that, which is gorgeous. But usually when we're doing therapy, it will be because they've got a hard relationship with someone. And what they then discover in that space is that there's a plan, and what was actually the purpose of having this interaction with this particular person. And so it's a very, very healing experience. But I suppose the difference with an NDE is that it's spontaneous and the person might not be aware of what exactly it's happening for. But I'm sure afterwards they know and they reflect. And sometimes I wonder if it happens for them to express it for other people to realize that it's actually normal that we're from home or elsewhere. So there's many reasons why, but certainly the facilitated ones are directed where the person usually comes with a symptom that they want to address. So it's beautiful work, can I say? It does not feel like work. It's beautiful.
I can imagine. So the facilitated NDEs would be the same as a between life regression, or is similar?
It's a combination, I feel. Sometimes it's very between lives, which I feel is the space where we prepare for incarnation. So it's kind of got a little bit of humanness to it, or it's presented to us in a bit of human terms because we're people now. So we need to see it. Some people particularly will need to see it in very human-like terms. Hence why I think they see the people or the council, whatever comes to them in a sort of a human format. And maybe they're also presented it in a kind of a hierarchical way. But sometimes they go beyond that in-between space where where is truly home, where there's really no structure. It's this everything but nothing that's so extraordinarily divine and beautiful. So often people have a touch of both. But the other thing that happens in those NDE type facilitated experiences is sometimes what we see is truly miraculous healing. And I refer to Anita Moriarty because she wrote a book about her spontaneous kind of near-death experience where she was healed. And of course, she was extraordinarily healed because she was so ill. But what happens when people come along for facilitated NDEs, they may know that they have something wrong with them, something quite serious in the health realms. It doesn't have to be serious. It can all be addressed. But sometimes it's something that's very harsh, and sometimes it's healed. So what happens in that phase or that space is usually it will be like, obviously they're very relaxed, but it will be like color maybe beamed through them and they can feel it and sense it. Wow. And maybe even see the color. But that seems to be the way with healing, that they'll experience this energy adjustment, if you like. That's how I describe healing. Their energy gets adjusted, and that is often what happens in that space. In fact, it always happens in that space. It just depends to what level they need it. For some people, it might be that they are addressing something such as, let's say, anxiety. They're plagued with anxiety. So it might be that it levels them out for that. Whereas someone might come along with some sort of autoimmune disorder and over time come back and say that they're in remission. So it's quite an extraordinary space. I think that energy knows no boundaries, and it's so special.
Thank you so much for sharing about this. So you can have a facilitated near-death experience without having to die and get some of those same benefits. That is amazing.
Yes.
So maybe we have time for a couple more questions. You mentioned that some people will get this done to see where they've been in other lifetimes with people in their life. And this topic of it's been called soul families or soulmates before. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do we come here with people that we've been with in past lifetimes?
The short answer is yes, we do. I think what people like to believe when they get involved in this, that it will be the people that they're very close to. But when they see their main soul people that they come back with, truthfully, anyone we're encountering in our lifetime, I feel certain that we will have interacted before. But when we talk about these soul families, which are usually a key person in our life, yes, they see them, but people, I think, often feel or want them to be the people that they're close to. But it's very often that they discover that they're the person that's created the most havoc for them in this life. So it might be that I think of someone who had their heart broken. There was a divorce, for example, and they go into all-out war after that. And there's a huge fallout. And there's a hate, and we hate each other now, even though we were in love before. And it might be that that person shows up in their soul group and they're like, what's he doing here? What's she doing here? And what happens then is it brings this wisdom to you as to why did you do this thing together? What was the purpose of it? And they then learn the deeper purpose to the interaction. And then what happens is all of that turmoil that has been endured in the situation for both people, it dissolves. It's like it dissolves it. And it's like that learning or that experience is over. So it's quite extraordinary, the soul families. And also there's the knowing when you see them or recognize them there. Sometimes they're a light. Sometimes they might be blue lights, for example, and sometimes you might see them in some sort of formation. But what is across the board same is this recognition goes beyond the visual. It's a feeling. It's a soul recognition. It's the same with past lives when you recognize them as someone you're with now or who's in your circles now. There's this knowing of who it is. Now that I said it's not always the people you're close to, for some it is. Usually it's a surprise who's there.
Yeah, that was my next question, was going to be to ask you if there's any signs you can look for to know who might be in your soul family. I know a lot of people are really curious. I know in my life I have some people that I just like, they've been this stable constant that were there from day one, and their energy feels so familiar and so safe. And then there's other people that have played a big role in my life, but it's definitely been a little bit more challenging.
You know what? It's most likely those ones. It's interesting, isn't it? But we've been together with all of them. But I think it's extraordinary when you can notice the feeling of ease, and you go through life together and there's no challenges. I also have that in my life a lot. And then the ones that I did have challenges with, and the few people who I've recognized very tight in mine were in this life. I can say my father is one, my brother is one, and also my husband. My ex-husband, actually. Mm-hmm. And there's been a big array of experiences, which I think people just don't consider until they have either a spontaneous phenomenon or phenomenal experience, or they get involved in these past lives or exploring their in-between space. So, yeah, I think what to look out for, two things. We'll give to the paradox. People that you feel so at ease with, or sometimes you might not even spend a lot of time with them, but there's this weird, amazing, I just love that person. Yeah. It doesn't matter if they're a friend, a boyfriend, your friend's husband. It doesn't matter. It doesn't go into anything more than just this, I just love that person. It's a feeling. It's a knowing. And what you'll know from that is, yes, you've been together before and it must have been positive. It's been a positive thing. And then there's this thing where you can't bear someone, or they've created you so much drama. It's like, it'll be those two paradoxes of feelings will be the people that are close in there. And I think the other thing to know is people who we are really close with now will have also done challenging things together. So it's not that every life is rosy. We have to do everything. We have to experience everything. So, and we've done so many lifetimes that it would not be unusual to find someone that we absolutely adore each other this time, and know that we've done some hard things together before as well.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, Dr. Toni, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I'd like to give you an opportunity to share where the viewers can find you.
Oh, thanks, Melissa. I have my website, which is ToniReillyInstitute.com, and I'm all over social media on YouTube and TikTok, and I'm growing that YouTube. I plan to put so many amazing things up there, but it's either under Dr. Toni Reilly or Soul Life Zone on social media. So, yes, thank you.
Wonderful. All of those links will be in the description, so be sure to check them out. You'll love her YouTube channel. Thank you again so much. I could talk to you for 3 times as long as we did, but thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. If you'd like to support this channel, I've shared the link to my Patreon in the description box, where you can get benefits like behind the scenes of this podcast, early ad-free access to interviews, and a monthly live stream Q&A with me. I've also shared the link to my free Discord community, which I've just started and I'm very excited about, where I share free resources and a bunch of channels and forums where people can connect and grow spiritually together. You'll also find the link to my website, lovecoveredlife.com, where I share my paintings, my TikTok and Instagram at Melissa Denise, and my clips channel, where I share shorter clips of my podcast episodes. Thank you for watching and thank you for your support.